From landing on the moon to mining on it, NASA always wants to be the first one to do anything on the closest celestial body, and this time China's getting in the way. So first, do you know what really gets the party started when it comes to putting boots on the moon? A good old-fashioned space race. It's like that epic showdown between the US and the Soviet Union that pushed us to the moon in the first place. And now, with China getting all hyped up for lunar missions, NASA is like, hold my beer. We're gonna grab all those moon medals first. So NASA's got big plans for all those moon medals they're planning to collect. They're on the hunt for researchers who can figure out how to use these medals for 3D printing and other cool stuff. And that's not all. They're making sure everything works perfectly. Apparently, they've been teaming up with universities. So basically, launching research programs left and right to create a medal-making pipeline on the moon.
The 3 liquid fuel main engines now throttling back to 72% of rated performance, going into the bucket, reducing the...
Talk about taking recycling to the next level. NASA's Matt Deans recently spilled the beans on the agency's lunar ambitions, saying that there are some metals on the moon that we could extract and use it to build things up there. And let's be real, if we want to turn the moon into our home away from home, we're gonna need to start constructing some pretty rad structures up there. So yeah, NASA's got big plans, and they're not afraid to spell it out. They want to build stuff on the moon, baby. While that's all fine and dandy, it isn't just NASA that's got all these plans. They've got China right on their heels, so they aren't messing around when it comes to the moon race. Just a couple of months ago, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson was all fired up.
We don't launch until it's right. And in fact, they've got a problem with the gases going on the engine bleed on one engine.
After the successful Artemis 1 mission that went around the moon and back, he straight up warned that we need to keep an eye on China, making sure they don't try to sneak in and set up camp under the guise of scientific research. And you know what? He's got a point. We don't want to see a repeat of China's aggressive territorial moves in the South China Sea. This is one race we definitely don't want to lose. This isn't the same old space race we saw in the 1960s, my friend. This time around, NASA's got some company in their mission to conquer the moon. And it isn't just China. Private companies are also getting in on the action. And let me tell you, these companies are making some pretty cool moves. Just last month, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin showed off a solar cell made with imitation moon dirt, aka regolith. That's right, they're using the actual stuff you'd find on the moon to create new tech. It's not just about winning the moon race anymore, it's about building a sustainable future up there. And that's where these efforts to use moon metals and other materials come in. They could make a big difference in making lunar operations more affordable in the long run. In fact, Blue Origin is already talking about the potential of their solar cells to eliminate power as a constraint anywhere on the moon. Now, that's what I call thinking big. It's exciting to think about what other breakthroughs we could see as we continue to explore and colonize our celestial neighbor. As much as we want to get our hands on all those sweet moon metals, we're still ways away from setting up a full-blown extraction and the refinery system up there. The reality is, we're going to need to set up some serious infrastructure on the moon before we can even begin to think about that. For example, any future astronauts who would be running a metal extraction system would need things like water and oxygen to breathe, things that we'll need to extract from the moon first. So while the future looks bright for lunar exploration, we've still got some work to do before we can start mining that precious space rock. But as of now, it looks like history is repeating itself. The space race is back on, and this time, it's between the US and China instead of Russia. Unfortunately, with relations between the two countries at an all-time low, it doesn't seem like we'll be seeing any collaboration anytime soon. The Artemis Accords, which is a framework for lunar exploration and development, is grounded in the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, already, but China and Russia have yet to sign on. So while we might have hoped for some international cooperation up there, it looks like we're back to a good old-fashioned space race. Who will win? Only time will tell. Speaking of collaborations, since the moon is pretty much free real estate, anyone, and I mean anyone, can aim for it. So believe it or not, our natural satellite is in the spotlight. And not just for the US, China, and Russia, but many other countries like India as well. Talking about Russia, they've got some plans brewing. Despite not sending a probe to the moon since 1976, Russia is now gearing up to launch its Luna 25 lander in 2023. The goal? To land near Bogoslavsky crater in the moon's south polar region and study components of the lunar polar exosphere. It's exciting to see multiple countries now setting their sights on the moon. Who knows what kind of new discoveries we'll make as we continue to explore our nearest celestial neighbor. Other than that, US is planning on some missions as well. In fact, not just one, but two. Two lunar landers will launch from the US Intuitive Machines Nova C craft. It will take off in March 2023, and if successful, it will become the first US spacecraft to land on the moon since Apollo 17 in 1972. Meanwhile, Astrobotic Technologies' Peregrine lunar lander is tentatively scheduled to touch down on the moon's surface in the first quarter of 2023. The Peregrine's primary mission objectives will be to study the moon's exosphere, magnetic fields, and other characteristics. Looking at all that hype around the moon, mining or just reaching it, what are they even looking for? Like, what's there to sell? Imagine being able to mine resources on the moon that can be used in space instead of having to bring them back to Earth. That's the idea behind moon mining. And it's not just about precious metals and materials like silicon anymore. Oxygen is the new star of the show, making up a whopping 42% of the moon's mass. By mining oxygen, space missions could save big on the cost of launching it from Earth. But the moon also has a lot of hydrogen, and that's where things get really interesting. Scientists are now eyeing the lunar ice collected in craters as a potential source of hydrogen. With this combination of oxygen and hydrogen, we could extract fuel for space travel and even use it for life support systems. So it's not just about striking it rich anymore. Moon mining could be the key to sustainable space exploration. The next step is to characterize and validate these discoveries. NASA has funded a series of small missions to explore the moon, including the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, also known as the CLPS robotic mission. These missions will use rovers with arms to scoop soil and spectrometers to analyze the chemical composition of the regolith, including water content. Ultimately, moon mining may be a step for a man, but it's definitely a giant leap for the mankind. And that's all I had to say about NASA and its race with China.